Sometimes, the ones who save us don't speak our language. They just stay when no one else does. In a frozen forest, a scarred German shepherd was found curled around a baby, shielding her from death itself. What brought him there? What kept him from leaving? This is a story of survival, trust, and the kind of love that rewrites what family means. If you believe that even broken souls can become protectors, stay with us. And if the story moves you, gently tap, like, subscribe, and follow along, because this one will stay with you. Late February had painted the green mountains of Vermont in a deep hush of white. The trees stood bare, their branches brittle and clawing against the pale gray sky. Snow, fresh from the night before, lay untouched over the forest floor, softening the jagged rocks and muffling every sound. In the quiet town of Maple Hollow, population just over 700, winter meant isolation, frozen mornings, and the kind of stillness that pressed heavy on the lungs. Rachel Harlow, 42, leaned against the wooden railing of her porch, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped ceramic mug. She had sharp cheekbones and a weathered face softened only by the kindness in her pale green eyes. Her graying auburn hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid. Tall and lean, with long arms that bore the quiet strength of years spent in service to nature, Rachel had worked as a ranger for over 2 decades. She lived alone, save for her teenage son and the memory of her late husband, who died in a fire rescue 6 years earlier. Since then, her tone had grown more reserved, her laughter quieter, but her sense of duty, fierce and unwavering, remained intact. The radio clip to her belt crackled to life, interrupting her morning stillness. Unit 4, come in. We've got a possible injury call sighted near Trailhead 12. Witness reported a large dog, maybe a wolf, injured and lying motionless by the ridge. Over. Rachel responded swiftly, voice calm. Copy that, dispatch. I'm on my way. Trailhead 12 was nearly 5 miles into the eastern portion of Green Mountain National Forest, known for its steep ridges and hidden glens. By the time Rachel reached the trailhead in her weather-worn green pickup, the clouds had begun to thicken, whispering promises of another snowstorm. She stepped out, snow crunching beneath her boots, and grabbed her backpack, now lighter after years of instinct over excess. She hiked quickly but carefully through the narrow switchbacks, her breath visible in the cold air. Half an hour in, she caught sight of something dark against the snow. A collapsed figure curled at the base of a shallow dip between 2 stone outcrops. Her heart quickened. As she approached, she saw it more clearly. A German shepherd, or what was left of one, after what looked like years of abandonment. The dog was large, muscular beneath the ribs that pressed against its dark, matted coat. Its fur was mostly black and gray with streaks of silver, not from age but exposure. Scars crossed its shoulders and muzzle. One ear was nicked, and its back leg appeared twisted at an odd angle. But it wasn't the wounds that stopped Rachel in her tracks. It was the eyes. They were amber, intense, alive. Not dulled by pain or resignation like she expected, but alert, burning with something deeper protectiveness. The dog growled low when she took another step, not with fear, but warning. Rachel crouched slowly, hands visible. Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you. The dog's hackles didn't rise. He didn't flinch, but he stayed curled, shielding something beneath his body, something she couldn't yet see. The scene was off. Injured animals fled. Even half-dead ones tried to drag themselves away. But this dog had rooted himself in place like a guardian. His chest rose and fell with shallow, pained breaths. Yet his focus never left her, unwavering like a sentry at a door that could not be opened. She reached for the small camera in her jacket and snapped a photo. Something instinctual in her told her this wasn't just about an injured animal. It was the beginning of something stranger. Rachel clicked her radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I've found the subject. German Shepherd, injured but conscious. Will need backup and veterinary assistance. Location just past mile marker 2 off Trailhead 12. Possible secondary concern. Stand by. Copy, Unit 4. Help's on the way. ETA 40 minutes, over. She turned her attention back to the dog. Snow was beginning to fall again, soft flakes landing silently on his fur. Rachel unzipped her coat and pulled out a thermal blanket, slowly laying it near him, but not touching. I can't help you unless you let me, she murmured. The dog didn't move, but just as she reached forward, slowly, carefully, she saw something beneath his front leg shift, something pink, a corner of fabric. Rachel blinked. Her breath caught. She leaned in. It wasn't fabric. It was a blanket. And under that blanket, barely visible, was the rounded shape of a tiny arm. Her voice, barely a whisper, escaped. "Oh my God." The dog shifted slightly, enough to reveal more of the bundle beneath him. Now clearly a baby, limp but breathing, wrapped in what must have once been a clean pink blanket, now streaked with soot and melting snow. Rachel stared in disbelief. For several long seconds, everything stood still. The snowfall, her heartbeat, the whole world narrowing to the impossible truth in front of her. The dog had not been dying. He had been guarding. And not just guarding, he had been shielding a human infant in the middle of the frozen Vermont forest. Rachel moved back slowly, not to retreat, but to give space. She clicked her radio again, breath trembling. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. Change of status. Infant found alive under the dog. Repeat human infant. Request medical evac immediately. I need paramedics, child protection, and law enforcement on standby. This is no longer a routine call." "Over. Unit 4, did you say infant?" "Affirmative. I'll stay on site. Send help fast." Rachel looked at the dog again. His eyes met hers, less guarded now, more exhausted. Snow clung to his muzzle. Beneath the storm-battered fur, his ribs heaved with effort, but his position did not falter. He was frozen in place, not by injury, but by commitment. She didn't know where the child had come from, or why a scarred, half-starved German shepherd had chosen to lie down in the snow and protect her. But she knew without a doubt, this dog had saved that baby's life, and she would do everything in her power to save his. The snow began to fall harder, soft flakes dancing in the wind as Rachel crouched, motionless, just a few feet from the dog and the bundle beneath him. Her breath came in steady puffs, misting the air, but her heart thundered in her chest. The German shepherd, still coiled tightly around the baby, bared his teeth in a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the snow like a warning from deep within the earth. He didn't lunge, he didn't bark, but the message was unmistakable. Stay back. Rachel didn't move closer. She simply sat, pressing her knees into the cold ground and keeping her hands open and low. "It's okay," she said gently. "You're doing great. You're protecting her. I just want to help." The dog's ears twitched, and for a flicker of a moment, the growl paused. Snow collected on his muzzle and shoulders, melting into the heat still radiating off his body. His eyes never left Rachel, but she noticed something subtle shift in his breathing, a tremor, a labored exhale. He was losing strength. Her radio crackled again. "Unit 4, this is EMT 1. We're 10 minutes out. Confirm infant status?" Rachel pressed the receiver. "Infant is alive. No visible external trauma. Still under the dog's protection. Subject dog is injured but conscious. Proceed with extreme caution." "Over." She placed the radio beside her and pulled off one glove, reaching slowly into her coat for an emergency thermal pad. "I'm going to leave this near you," she said softly. "Not for me, for her." The dog watched her every movement, a silent sentinel. She laid the small activated heating pad on the snow just inches away. The dog didn't react. That was progress. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The snow was falling thick and fast now, and the wind was starting to whisper through the trees in longer, lower tones. The infant beneath the dog shifted, letting out a muffled cry, just a whimper. Rachel's chest clenched. She could see now a tiny hand peeking from beneath the blanket, pale and trembling. Behind her, the crunch of boots broke the silence. Rachel stood immediately and turned to see Dr. Naomi Grant, the town's only emergency field veterinarian, climbing down the ridge with her assistant, Tom Rivers. Naomi was in her late 50s with streaked silver hair pulled back into a loose braid, a lined face of experience and no nonsense, and piercing gray eyes that had seen everything from broken eagles to tranquilized moose. She wore a bulky red parka that gave her the shape of a snowbank, but her stride was swift and confident. "Is this the dog?" she asked, breath visible as she crouched beside Rachel. "Jesus!" Rachel nodded. "It's not just the dog, there's a baby under him." Naomi blinked once, then dropped her medical bag to the snow. "Show me." Rachel pointed. The bundle of pink fabric was barely visible, but the shape of it, small, fragile, impossible, was unmistakable. Naomi's face shifted from hardened calm to something softer, more reverent. Well, I'll be damned. Tom, her assistant, was younger, mid-20s, bearded, quiet, with a naturally anxious energy that flared now as he crouched behind Naomi. That's a human infant. That's a dog. That's insane. Not insane, Naomi said. Miraculous. Naomi reached into her pack for a small syringe. We don't have time to wait this out. His breathing's off. He's protecting her, yes, but he's also dying. If he collapses, he'll crush her. We sedate, light dosage, just enough to shift him without distressing either of them. Rachel nodded, but placed a hand on Naomi's arm. Give me a minute. She turned back to the dog. Hey, you've done more than anyone could ever ask, but we need to help her now. And to do that, I need you to trust me. The dog's eyes, still sharp, but glazing now, met hers. There was something ancient in them, not wild, but knowing, as if this creature understood far more than any textbook could explain. Naomi handed Rachel the syringe. You do it. He trusts you more than anyone. Rachel approached slowly, moving around so the dog could see every step. She didn't hide the needle. There was no point. When she knelt within arm's reach, the dog let out a long, deep sigh, and in that breath, Rachel knew he had made a choice. I'm sorry, she whispered, pressing the needle gently into the muscle of his back leg. He barely flinched. Within a minute, the tension in his shoulders eased, his breathing slowed. And carefully, with Rachel guiding his body, he shifted just enough to uncover the bundle beneath. The baby was crying now, quiet but steady. Her cheeks were flushed from cold, lips tinged with blue. Rachel scooped her up immediately and wrapped her in her own coat, pressing her close to her chest. She's warm, Rachel said. She's warm because of him. Naomi was already moving, checking vitals on both the infant and the dog. Tom relayed updates over the radio, calling for the medevac team to land near the clearing. Rachel stood in the middle of it all, cradling the child, snow falling around them like a soft curtain. A few minutes later, the whir of rotor blades broke through the trees. The EMTs arrived, led by Reese Maddox, a paramedic in her 30s with coffee-colored skin, close-cropped curls under her beanie, and a voice as calm as snow. She took the infant gently from Rachel's arms, checking pulse, breath, eyes. She's dehydrated, undernourished, and cold but alive. We've seen worse. We can work with this. Naomi was kneeling beside the dog, now asleep from the sedative. He's got a fractured rear leg, severe muscle fatigue, and likely frostbite along the paw pads, but he'll make it, barely. Rachel placed a hand on the dog's head. He stayed out here in this cold 4 hours, maybe longer, just to keep her alive. Reese looked at the child, then the dog, then back again. And I thought I'd seen everything. The team loaded the infant into the chopper. Naomi and Tom stayed behind to monitor the dog, preparing a sling stretcher to move him gently. Rachel stepped back and watched as the helicopter rose into the gray sky, carrying the girl to safety. Then she turned to the dog again, now quiet but breathing. We're not done, she whispered to him. You're coming with me. The morning after the rescue, the town of Maple Hollow awoke beneath a sky painted soft blue and streaked with the fading breath of the storm. Frost clung to rooftops and window panes. The local news already buzzed with whispers about the baby found in the woods and the strange dog that had guarded her like a sentinel made of snow and scars. At the small regional hospital just outside town, Rachel sat in the family waiting room, elbows on her knees, watching the swinging doors of the neonatal unit. She hadn't slept. She hadn't even taken her boots off. The faint scent of pine and dog still clung to her coat. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, the amber eyes, the broken body, the fierce devotion, and that tiny bundle of warmth still breathing beneath him. The door creaked open, and Dr. Marlene Ashford stepped into the room. In her early 50s, Marlene was one of the longest practicing pediatricians in the county. Her short salt and pepper hair framed a calm, square face with a kind mouth and observant eyes that rarely missed anything. Years in rural medicine had made her both practical and deeply empathetic traits that earned her quiet respect among both patients and colleagues. She's stable, Marlene said softly. We've warmed her core temperature. She's showing signs of dehydration. But there's no frostbite, no trauma. She was lucky. Rachel let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. How old is she? Best guess? Around 6 months, developmentally appropriate. But no identification, no medical records. She wasn't left with anything. Except a dog, Rachel murmured. Dr. Ashford nodded. And not just any dog. That German Shepherd may have been the difference between life and death. Rachel stood. Can I see her? She's asleep now, but yes, I'll take you in. Moments later, Rachel found herself staring down at a hospital crib. The baby lay wrapped in a clean, soft blanket, her tiny hands curled into fists. Her cheeks had more color now, her breathing gentle and rhythmic. Rachel felt something stir in her chest, not quite maternal, but fierce and rooted. Protective. She needs a name, Marlene said. Rachel hesitated, then smiled faintly. Let's call her Emily, for now. Meanwhile, 30 miles away at the Maple Hollow Wildlife Shelter, a rust-red barn converted into a small rescue clinic, the German Shepherd lay sedated in a large, padded recovery pen. The structure sat behind Rachel's cabin, nestled against a pine grove that moaned in the winter wind. Inside, Naomi Grant knelt beside the dog, her gloved hands moving with practiced care. "You're a mystery, aren't you?" she whispered. "All this pain, and still you chose to stay." The dog's leg had been splinted and bandaged, his wounds cleaned. He was still unconscious, though breathing steadily. Naomi had seen many strays, many battle-worn creatures with fire still in them, but none like this one. The barn door creaked open, and in stepped Evan Harlow, Rachel's 12-year-old son. Tall for his age, with a mop of unkempt brown hair and deep-set hazel eyes, Evan had always been a quiet boy. His silence had grown deeper since his father's death, a firefighter who'd perished in a blaze 2 years prior. The loss had carved a hollow space in him that no one, not even Rachel, had been able to reach. "Hey, Doc," Evan said softly, hands stuffed in his hoodie pocket. Naomi turned, surprised. "Didn't hear you come in." "Mom said the dog's here." Naomi gestured him forward. "Come meet him, but quietly. He's been through a lot." Evan approached the pen slowly. When he saw the dog, something in his posture changed, shoulders dropping, gaze softening. "He looks like he fought a whole war." Naomi smiled gently. "Maybe he did." Evan crouched near the gate. "What's his name?" "Doesn't have one yet. We haven't even figured out where he came from." Evan tilted his head. "Can I call him Shadow?" Naomi considered. "That seems to fit." From that moment, Evan began visiting the barn every day after school. He brought books and sat by the pen, reading aloud. He brought blankets, bits of food. Eventually, Shadow began to stir, first a twitch, then a turn of the head. Within days, his eyes opened, and when they met Evan's, they didn't hold fear. Back at the sheriff's office, the official investigation had begun. Sheriff Logan Parker, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with close-cropped black hair and a strong jaw, stood by the whiteboard in the briefing room. A former Marine turned law enforcement, Logan was respected for his steady presence, no-nonsense tone, and quietly protective nature. He had a soft spot for Rachel, though he rarely showed it beyond dry humor and midnight coffee deliveries. His deputy, Amelia Reed, 29, wiry and sharp-eyed with a background in forensic psychology, taped the last of the photographs to the board, tire tracks near the trailhead, a pink blanket, the thermal readings from the chopper. "No missing child reports match," she said. "We've checked statewide. Either the child was never reported missing, or someone didn't want her found." Logan rubbed a hand over his stubbled chin. "This was no accident. That baby didn't wander out there. Someone placed her, deliberately, and left her with a dog." Logan's eyes narrowed. "That's what keeps me up." He picked up the photo of Shadow, taken just before sedation. What kind of dog protects a baby for hours in the snow, without leaving, without panicking? Amelia said softly. The kind that knew exactly what he was doing. Back at home, Rachel stood on her porch watching the barn. She sipped from a fresh mug of coffee, steam curling around her face. Evan sat inside, reading to Shadow. His voice rising, falling, sometimes pausing to comment, as if the dog could understand every word. Rachel's chest ached, not from sorrow, but from something she hadn't felt in years. The slow rekindling of connection. Emily was safe, Shadow was healing, and Evan, her quiet, unreachable son, was speaking again. The snow began to fall once more, soft and clean. For the first time in a long while, Rachel felt like maybe things were shifting. And somewhere out there, the question remained, who had left a baby in the woods, and why? The wind howled down the mountain ridges, whistling through bare trees and rattling old shutters on the barn's windows. Inside the shelter, the air was warm and thick with the scent of straw, antiseptic, and the quiet rhythm of recovery. Shadow lay curled on a padded cot, his breath steady but shallow, his eyes half closed beneath the low glow of the heat lamp. His bandaged leg extended stiffly, and the bruises along his ribs had begun to yellow with healing. But it was the older marks, the ones no vet could treat, that told the real story. Rachel stood over him with Dr. Naomi Grant, both women quiet as they studied the dog's body. Naomi wore her reading glasses on a string around her neck, now pushed up to her forehead, as she gently parted Shadow's fur with gloved fingers. "These aren't just from the woods," Naomi murmured. "This one here looks like an old bite, probably from another dog. But this," she pointed toward a circular scar near Shadow's side. "This was a harness rub, repeated friction over months, maybe years." Rachel frowned. "You think he was trained?" "I think he was worked," Naomi replied, "and worked hard. See this notch on his ear? Could be a tattoo mark, like from a breeder or unit designation. He might have been military, police, or part of a private security outfit. But wherever he came from, he didn't leave gently." Rachel knelt beside the cot. "No tag, no chip?" Naomi shook her head. "None. If he had one, someone removed it." Rachel's jaw tightened. "So someone erased his identity and left him to die." Shadow stirred slightly, ears twitching toward her voice. Rachel reached out and let her hand rest gently near his paw. He didn't pull away. "You deserved better," she whispered. Outside the barn, the snow had started to melt in patches. Early spring was nudging at the corners of the world. Even if Vermont wasn't quite ready to let go of winter, the sun cast long gold streaks across the woods beyond the shelter, catching on the icicles that dripped steadily from the eaves. Evan appeared at the barn door, his breath fogging the air. He carried a fleece blanket and a sketchbook under one arm. Rachel turned as he entered, offering him a faint smile. "Hey, sweetheart." Evan nodded, his gaze drifting to Shadow. "How is he today?" "Stronger," Rachel replied. "Naomi thinks he may have been a working dog, maybe even police." Evan's eyes lit up with interest. "Like K-9 units?" "Exactly." He walked over and knelt beside the cot, unfolding the blanket and tucking it gently around Shadow's side. "I brought him this. Smells like the house." Naomi raised a brow, impressed. "You've got a good instinct, kid." Evan shrugged, but his lips twitched upward. "He likes stories too. I read to him yesterday from The Hobbit. He fell asleep halfway through The Trolls." Rachel chuckled. "He's got good taste." As Evan settled in beside Shadow, Rachel and Naomi stepped outside. The sun was higher now, the light cutting through the frost and gleaming on the trees. Naomi lit a cigarette with gloved fingers, her one vice, always kept outside and away from animals. "You know," she said, exhaling a slow trail of smoke, "he's good for Evan." Rachel crossed her arms, watching through the barn window. "I haven't seen him this open in years. Sometimes healing doesn't look like therapy. Sometimes it's a boy and a dog that know what pain feels like." Rachel nodded slowly. "Yeah, they both know what it's like to be left behind." Back at the sheriff's department, Logan Parker stared at the printed photos laid across his desk. He ran a finger along the tire tracks captured near the edge of the woods. Parallel grooves, deeply imprinted, cut cleanly into the snow just off the old fire road. No prints around them, just the vehicle's path in and out. He turned toward Deputy Amelia Reed, who leaned against the wall with a cup of stale coffee in her hand. "Anything on the tire treads?" "Still running it," she said. "Best match so far is a mid-2000s SUV. Could be a Jeep, maybe a Ford Explorer. No nearby traffic cams caught anything? Closest one is 5 miles out, near the gas station. Nothing suspicious on record from that night." Logan exhaled. "So, whoever dropped her there knew exactly how to avoid being seen." "Means premeditation," Amelia added. "Means someone wanted her found, but not too soon." Amelia walked over, picked up the file labeled Emily Doe. Inside were photos of the blanket, the baby's fingerprints, notes from the hospital. Logan tapped one particular image, a close-up of the blanket's corner. There, faint but distinct, was a single embroidered letter, M. "That's not from a thrift store," he said. "That's custom stitching." We send that photo to every local seamstress, every hospital gift registry, and maternity boutique in the state. Someone made that. Amelia nodded and grabbed the file. On it. Later that afternoon, Evan sat alone beside Shadow. He'd brought a piece of charcoal from Rachel's art supplies and was sketching in silence. On the page, a wolfish silhouette stood between two trees, snow falling around it, its eyes bright. In the background, faint outlines of a cabin and a girl in a bundle. "Do you think she misses him?" he asked suddenly, not looking up. Rachel stood in the doorway, her heart catching. "I think she doesn't know what to miss yet," she said, "but I think she feels it." Evan frowned. He didn't leave her. That's gotta mean something. Rachel knelt beside her son. "It does. It means he chose to stay." Shadow stirred again. This time, his tail moved, just once. But Evan grinned like it was a sunrise. "You see that? He gets it." Rachel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Evan's forehead. They sat there for a while, boy and mother, both quiet, both listening to the soft breath of a dog who'd once stood between death and a child. And for the first time in a long time, silence felt safe. The wind had softened by the time dusk fell over Maple Hollow, casting long violet shadows across the ridgeline and stretching the outlines of pine trees like brush strokes on cold canvas. Inside the sheriff's office, a single light flickered above a wooden desk, scarred by years of use, paperwork stacked high beside an untouched cup of coffee. Sheriff Logan Parker sat back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes on the young woman sitting opposite him. Her name was Melissa Kane, and the room seemed to shrink around her. She was barely 20, with shoulder-length dark blonde hair tucked beneath a faded hoodie, oversized on her wiry frame. Her cheeks were hollowed slightly by stress, and the dark circles beneath her eyes made her look older than she was. She sat with her hands folded tightly on her lap, knuckles white, shoulders hunched inward like someone used to bracing for impact. Deputy Amelia Reed stood to the side, arms folded, silently observing. Her expression wasn't hostile, just unreadable. Logan, on the other hand, leaned forward with the stillness of a man who'd handled more confessions than he cared to count. "You understand the seriousness of this, Melissa," he said calmly. "An infant left alone in freezing temperatures. You're lucky that dog found her first." "I know," Melissa whispered, voice cracking. I didn't want to leave her. I thought I'd be back. I was going to come back." Logan raised an eyebrow. "You were found at a bus stop 15 miles away, heading out of state." She shook her head violently. "No, I wasn't running. I mean, I was, but not from her. From him." "Him?" Melissa's eyes welled. "My boyfriend, ex-Jason Cross. He's not just angry, he's violent. When I told him I was pregnant, he flipped. Said if I ruined his life, he'd ruin mine. He started showing up drunk, screaming, breaking things. He said if I took the baby and left, he'd find me, hurt her." Logan glanced at Amelia, who quietly stepped out to start a background check. "You never reported the abuse," Logan said. "I didn't think anyone would believe me," she replied. "I don't have parents, I don't have money, and he's charming to everyone else. Like nothing ever happened." Logan's expression softened slightly, but he kept his voice firm. "So, you took the baby into the forest. In winter." Melissa let out a trembling breath. "I thought if I put her somewhere safe, someone might find her, some hiker or ranger. I left her with a blanket and formula in a bag under the trees. I swear I wasn't going to leave her forever. I panicked." There was a silence, long and still. Then Logan reached for the report folder on his desk and set it aside. "She's alive," he said finally, "thanks to that dog. If you'd waited one more hour, Melissa, you'd be facing a funeral." "Not questioning." Melissa broke down completely, burying her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Logan gave her a moment before continuing. "You're not under arrest yet, but we're placing you under protective evaluation. You'll be held at the county's temporary crisis care center, and Child Protective Services will assess your capacity for reunification. Understood?" She nodded, unable to speak. Meanwhile, in Rachel's cabin, the wood stove crackled gently as Evan lay on the rug, reading a worn picture book aloud to Shadow. The dog, now able to move with a limp, had shifted closer during the story, resting his muzzle near Evan's foot. The connection between them had become unshakable. Rachel stood in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel, watching the quiet scene unfold. Her heart warmed at the sight. A knock sounded at the front door. Rachel opened it to find Amelia standing on the porch, her face slightly flushed from the cold, holding a folder under one arm. "You got a minute?" Amelia asked. Rachel nodded and stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, the smell of cedar and stew hanging in the air. Amelia opened the folder and pulled out a single photograph, a driver's license photo of Melissa Kane. "That's her," she said. She admitted it, said she left the baby because she was scared of the father, claimed she was going to come back. Rachel looked down at the face of the young woman, so young, so tired. "Do you believe her?" Amelia sighed. "I think she's telling the truth. Her background checks out. Good student, no criminal record, no history of drugs or violence. She's got no family and no support system, just fear." Rachel exhaled. "That baby was lucky." "More than lucky," Amelia replied. "She had a guardian." Rachel glanced toward the other room, where Shadow lay beside Evan, his body scarred, his spirit gentle. "Yeah, she did." Later that night, at the Crisis Care Center, a modest brick facility with a quiet interior and soft lighting, Melissa sat on a small bed, her knees drawn to her chest. A counselor named Wendy Tran, a Vietnamese-American woman in her late 30s, with kind eyes and a soft, steady presence, sat across from her, with a notepad resting untouched in her lap. Wendy's approach was always rooted in patience. She had once been a social worker on the West Coast, before relocating to Vermont to escape her own burnout. Her voice, always low and melodic, had a way of calming even the most frayed nerves. "You did something that's hard to understand, Melissa," she said gently. "But you're here. You didn't run. And that means something." Melissa's eyes shimmered. "Do you think I'll ever get her back?" Wendy didn't answer right away. "That depends on you, on your honesty, your commitment, and the choices you make now. But people have come back from worse." The words hung in the air like distant bells. Not promises, but possibilities. Back at the shelter, Evan brushed Shadow's coat carefully, a small radio playing soft classical music in the background. The dog shifted, letting out a sigh of contentment. Evan leaned close and whispered, "They found her mom." Shadow's ears perked slightly. "I don't know what that means yet," Evan added, "but I hope it means good things." Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet and thin, more like a whisper than a storm. Inside the warmth of the barn, the boy and the dog sat together, both healing, both waiting for whatever came next. The pediatric wing of Pine Valley Hospital was unusually quiet for a Friday morning. The usual shuffle of nurses and the hum of machines were still present, but they moved under a hush, one born not from illness, but from something more mysterious. Room 204, tucked at the end of the corridor, had become the center of curiosity and soft conversation among the staff. That was where baby Emily lay, eyes wide, fingers clenching the edge of a soft pink blanket, listening. Dr. Marlene Ashford stood at the observation window, clipboard in hand, glasses perched low on her nose. She wore her usual forest green scrubs, sleeves rolled just below the elbow, and her hair in the same clipped style she'd kept for years. She had seen countless cases of trauma and recovery, but this one was unlike anything she had encountered. "She won't eat unless there's barking playing," she murmured, scribbling a note. Actual recorded barking, not white noise, not lullabies, Shadow's voice, specifically. Next to her stood Dr. Kyle Renner, a young developmental psychologist from Dartmouth Medical, brought in for a consult. He was lean, tall, with neatly parted black hair, and an analytical presence that softened when speaking about children. At 32, Kyle had made his reputation on early childhood attachment theory and trauma response. His brow furrowed as he observed Emily on the monitor. "She's exhibiting signs of imprint-based bonding," he said, tapping the screen. "Likely tied to the intense sensory experience she had during her survival. That dog didn't just keep her warm. He became her source of safety, the only consistent stimulus her brain could anchor to." Marlene looked sideways. "You're saying the baby thinks he's her parent?" Kyle shrugged slightly. "In psychological terms, not parent, but protector, absolutely. She associates his voice, his scent, maybe even his heartbeat with survival." Inside the room, Emily let out a soft, fretful noise. A nurse, Becca, a red-haired woman in her 40s with a warm, motherly manner, tapped her phone and replayed a short audio clip recorded earlier, Shadow's low bark, followed by a gentle whine. Immediately, Emily stopped fussing. Her eyes widened. She cooed. Kyle exhaled. That is what profound imprinting looks like. Meanwhile, back in Maple Hollow, Evan stood inside the barn with Shadow, the dog's fur now fuller, his limp less noticeable. Evan was brushing his coat, a daily ritual they had established without a word being spoken. Today he spoke more than usual. They say she only stops crying when she hears you. Isn't that wild? Evan smiled faintly. I think maybe she remembers how warm you kept her, like the way I remember Dad's laugh. Shadow's ears twitched. Evan paused, eyes growing distant. I didn't talk for a long time after Dad died. Mom said it was like I folded up inside myself. Like I was stuck in a box I couldn't get out of. He glanced at Shadow. You get it, huh? Shadow shifted closer, placing his heavy head against Evan's knee. Rachel had come up behind them, leaning on the barn doorframe, her face partially hidden by her scarf. She said nothing, only watched them. There was no need to interfere. Healing, in this barn, was happening without prescriptions or plans. That afternoon, the hospital contacted Rachel with an unusual request. We want to try something, Dr. Kyle Renner said over the phone. A supervised visit between the dog and the infant. We'd like your help. Rachel hesitated. What exactly are you asking? Bring Shadow to the hospital. Let her see him. We'll observe. No contact unless it feels safe. It's purely exploratory. But given her emotional regulation tied to his presence, this may help us understand how to support her long-term. Rachel agreed. Evan insisted on coming along. The next day they arrived at Pine Valley in Rachel's pickup truck, Shadow sitting calmly in the back seat. Evan had insisted on brushing him beforehand and tied a simple blue bandana around his neck, a soft touch of affection and, he claimed, for style. Hospital staff cleared the pediatric wing for the visit. Emily was placed in her crib, facing the wide observation window. The room had been cleared of all unnecessary furniture, and Shadow was led to the opposite side of a clear glass partition. When Emily saw him, everything changed. Her eyes lit up, her legs kicked, and she reached forward with both arms. Her voice broke into laughter, sudden and full, as she pressed her face against the glass. Shadow tilted his head, his tail thumping slowly on the floor. He let out a single bark, low, controlled, but familiar. Emily responded instantly. She stopped fussing, began babbling, and waved her tiny hands excitedly. Kyle, watching from the observation room, leaned toward Dr. Ashford. Her heart rate just dropped to baseline. Cortisol levels normalized. That dog is emotionally regulating her. Rachel blinked back tears. Evan stood beside her, stunned. He's like her anchor, Evan whispered. Kyle nodded. Exactly. Over the next 15 minutes, Emily remained focused entirely on Shadow. She reached when he moved, calmed when he stilled, and Shadow, for his part, never took his eyes off her, not once. When the visit ended and Rachel gently guided him toward the door, Emily began to whimper again. Evan turned and gave her a soft wave through the glass. She'll see him again, he said. I promise. Back in the truck, Rachel looked at her son. You did good today. Evan glanced at Shadow. We both did. That night, as Rachel tucked Evan into bed, she paused at the doorway. You know, you and Shadow, it's like you're healing each other. Evan smiled sleepily. He just knows what it feels like to be left. So do I. We don't talk about it. We just understand. Rachel turned off the light and whispered, Sometimes understanding is louder than words. Outside, the stars were breaking through the clouds. Inside, a boy, a dog, and a baby, each shaped by pain, were slowly learning to live again. The courtroom was small, old, and smelled faintly of worn leather and cedar polish. Light filtered in through tall, dust-streaked windows that cast gold stripes across the floor. It wasn't the kind of place where life-altering decisions were usually made, but today, this little room in the Maple County Courthouse felt like the center of the world. Seated at the front, Judge Helen Croft, 61, maintained a quiet, watchful presence. With sharp cheekbones, silver hair swept into a soft bun, and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, she was known throughout the state for her level head and uncommon empathy. Her rulings were firm, but rarely cold, always grounded in what she believed would protect the most vulnerable. Today, her gaze shifted between the two most unlikely subjects ever brought before her bench: a 6-month-old infant named Emily Kane and a German shepherd named Shadow. To Judge Croft's left, Dr. Kyle Renner, the child psychologist, adjusted his tie nervously. Beside him sat Sophia Lentz, a representative from Child Protective Services, a woman in her mid-40s with a kind face framed by dark curls, and a wardrobe that always looked like it came from thrift stores with purpose. She had seen too many failed reunifications to take any decision lightly, but something about this case, this child, this dog, had shifted her usual skepticism. Rachel sat behind them, her hands resting on Evan's small shoulders. Evan wore a button-up shirt and jeans, his hair brushed, his nervousness poorly hidden beneath a mask of practiced calm. Shadow lay quietly at their feet, tail resting still, his amber eyes focused forward. Melissa Kane, the baby's mother, sat on the opposite bench with Wendy Tran, her counselor. Melissa looked thinner, but stronger. Her posture was straight, her hands folded, her eyes red but resolute. Judge Croft cleared her throat gently. "Let's proceed." Dr. Renner rose first. "Your Honor, as you've reviewed in the submitted evaluations, Emily has demonstrated an unprecedented attachment to Shadow. Clinical signs reduced anxiety, normalized vital signs, improved appetite, have all been documented consistently in his presence." He paused, glancing at the dog. "While it is highly unusual to consider an animal as a stabilizing therapeutic presence in an infant's care plan, in this case, it is not just beneficial, it is essential. Removing Shadow at this stage would be more than disruptive. It could be traumatic." Judge Croft tilted her head. "And your recommendation?" "We propose a temporary experimental care arrangement. Emily will be relocated under medical and CPS supervision to a licensed wildlife sanctuary adjacent to the Harlow residence. Rachel Harlow and her son Evan will serve as temporary foster caregivers. Shadow will remain as a companion animal. Melissa Kane will have scheduled supervised visitation during her recovery." There was silence in the room as that settled. Sophia Lentz stood next. "CPS agrees to this recommendation with clear conditions. The site will be monitored weekly. A licensed pediatric nurse will check in bi-weekly. Any sign of distress or regression, and we will revisit custody." Judge Croft folded her hands. "And the mother?" Wendy Tran stood, her calm voice steady. "Melissa has complied with all court-ordered treatment, has shown consistent psychological progress, and is committed to her daughter's well-being above all else. She supports the recommendation." All eyes turned to Melissa, who rose slowly. "I know what I did was wrong. I live with that every day, but Emily's safety comes first. If this is what she needs to be okay, then I support it. I'll earn her trust back in time." Judge Croft looked at Rachel. "Ms. Harlow, do you accept this responsibility?" Rachel stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Croft's gaze swept the room one last time, lingering on Shadow. "Then it's settled. This court approves the temporary care arrangement as recommended. We'll reconvene in 90 days to reassess progress." The gavel fell softly. 2 weeks later, Emily arrived at the sanctuary with a pediatric nurse and a trunk full of medical supplies. A modest but cozy guest cabin had been prepared with insulated walls, temperature monitors, and a crib placed beside the fireplace. A baby monitor linked directly to Rachel's bedroom. The air still carried the bite of early spring, but the sun had begun to warm the valley. Evan held the door open as Rachel brought Emily in, bundled in a lavender jacket. Shadow was already inside, seated calmly on the rug. As soon as Emily saw him, she lit up with a delighted squeal, her arms flailing with joy. "She remembers," Evan whispered. Shadow padded over and lay beside her crib. The moment her little fingers touched his fur, her breathing eased, her body relaxed. She curled up against him like a nestling returning to its shell. That night, Rachel sat at the kitchen table, watching Evan feed Emily mashed peas while Shadow lay nearby, one eye open. It felt unreal, this patchwork family stitched together by snow and sorrow. And yet, in the quiet clinking of spoon to bowl, in the soft coos and Evan's shy laughter, it felt like the only thing that had ever made sense. Melissa's first supervised visit came 3 days later. She arrived with Wendy and a social worker named Marcus Gray, a tall man in his early 30s with a gentle baritone and a no-pressure approach to observation. Rachel met her at the porch, nerves humming, but when Melissa stepped into the cabin and saw her daughter sleeping against Shadow's chest, she froze. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Thank you," not to Rachel, not even to the humans in the room, but to the dog. Shadow lifted his head and blinked. Emily stirred and opened her eyes. She saw Melissa and didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She simply stared for a moment and then reached toward her. Melissa stepped forward slowly, knelt, and let her daughter's small hand touch her cheek. "She remembers," Melissa whispered, voice cracking. "She knows I'm her mother." Rachel put a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then let's help her remember it in the right way." Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, the air was filled with something warmer than sunlight. Forgiveness. 1 year later, the forest around Maple Hollow had bloomed into its greenest summer in years. The pines stood proud, sun slanting through their branches like golden curtains, and the wildflowers along the edge of the sanctuary painted the earth in streaks of lavender, yellow, and deep blue. The old barn behind Rachel's cabin had been painted anew, the fencing reinforced, and the guest cabin where Emily once slept with medical monitors now stood as a nursery warmed by laughter rather than beeping machines. Shadow, no longer the scarred, skittish creature of that frozen winter day, now moved with calm confidence. His fur had grown thicker, the once barren patches filled in with time and care. He walked with a slight limp one that no longer signified pain but memory. Around his neck, he wore a leather collar etched with a single silver plate. Guardian. A gift from Evan, who had chosen the word with careful thought, as if it were a medal. Evan had changed too. He stood a few inches taller, his face fuller, and his voice deeper now, though still carrying the softness of someone who listened more than he spoke. At 13, he no longer clung to silence the way he once had. His days were now filled with schoolwork, hikes through the forest with Shadow, and hours of sketching in the sun. His eyes, once clouded with loss, had begun to sparkle again. That morning, he sat on the cabin porch with Emily, who was now 18 months old and endlessly curious. She tottered barefoot through the grass, giggling as she tried to copy Shadow's pacing. The dog patiently matched her movements, slowing when she stumbled, nudging her upright with his nose when she veered off course. Rachel watched from the kitchen window, her chest swelling with a feeling that had once seemed foreign. Peace. She had just turned 43, but the past year had softened something in her. Her face, though still marked by fine lines, now often carried a gentle lightness. She no longer woke up haunted by what she might lose, but grateful for what she had kept and found. Melissa arrived just after noon, her car tires crunching over the gravel. She stepped out with a woven basket in one hand and a book in the other. Her hair was longer now, tied in a braid that rested on her back, and the wary tension she once carried in her shoulders had lessened. She looked strong, slender, yes, but healthy, and her eyes no longer darted with fear. A small silver bracelet worn and simple encircled her wrist, a recovery token from her support group. Rachel greeted her at the porch. "Right on time," Melissa smiled. "Couldn't miss my Thursday," she said, holding up the basket. "Brought fresh berries and Emily's favorite, the blueberry muffins with too many blueberries." Evan rolled his eyes good-naturedly from the lawn. "She eats the berries off the top and throws the rest at Shadow." "Shadow's not complaining," Melissa said with a soft laugh. Inside the cabin, Emily reached for Melissa without hesitation. The transition between mother and foster caregiver was now smooth, organic. Emily didn't cry when Melissa left anymore, but she always smiled when she arrived. It was a rhythm they had grown into. Like dancers learning to move in time with music, neither of them had known how to hear at first. The custody agreement finalized just last month granted Melissa shared custody under supervision, with gradual unsupervised hours on weekends. She was still rebuilding her life, working part-time at the local library and continuing therapy with Wendy Tran. But she had earned every step back, brick by brick, through consistency, presence, and love. That evening, the family, because that's what they were, now gathered around the fire pit behind the cabin. Rachel grilled vegetables. Evan tuned a second-hand guitar Melissa had gifted him. Emily sat cross-legged beside Shadow, one hand resting in his fur, as if she'd always known the world through his warmth. Melissa passed around plates. "You know, she said, glancing at Rachel. I think this place healed more than just Emily. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You mean the part where you brought muffins? I mean all of it, Melissa said. You, Evan, Shadow, me. I thought family had to look a certain way. But it turns out, love figures it out on its own. Evan strummed a quiet chord, like a puzzle where none of the pieces were made to fit, but they still do. Rachel smiled. Maybe we were never meant to fit, just meant to hold. Shadow lay between them, ears flicking toward the crackling fire, his tail thumping softly against the grass. His eyes, once fierce and guarded, now glimmered with quiet contentment. The stars began to prick the sky above, one by one. Emily reached for a stick and waved it like a magic wand. Shadow, she murmured. Shadow! The dog raised his head, tail swishing once, then leaned into her touch. Melissa whispered, She still remembers the snow. Rachel nodded, and she remembers who pulled her through it. As night settled, Evan played a lullaby, simple, sweet, and slightly off-key, and the circle around the fire grew quieter. Emily yawned against Shadow's shoulder. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Melissa closed her eyes. No one spoke, because sometimes the truest things don't need to be said. They just need to be lived. Sometimes what saves a life isn't a siren or a spotlight. It's the warmth of a scarred dog's body in the snow, the loyalty that doesn't ask for thanks, the silent choice to stay. Shadow didn't just protect Emily. He protected what was good, what was still possible, in a world that had nearly given up. And maybe that wasn't chance. Maybe that was grace. Because when we open our hearts to the broken, the lost, the wild, we make room for miracles. Small ones, quiet ones, the kind that save more than one soul at a time. If this story touched something deep in you, share it with someone who still believes in the goodness of the world. Leave a comment below and tell us how Shadow's courage reminded you of your own journey. And if you believe that love can come on 4 legs, wrapped in scars and silent devotion, type Amen. Subscribe for more stories of hope, healing, and the beautiful creatures who walk beside us. May you be blessed, and may your heart always stay open.